What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Biblical Hitman. It's your host, Steven. I got him in the studio, ladies and gentlemen. You've been asking for him. We got him. Nathaniel Gillis in the house. Everyone, listen, hey, if it's your first time coming across the channel, I appreciate you being here. If you want to support the video side of this podcast, head on over to YouTube, smash that subscribe button, like the show, share it with your friends, and drop a comment down below, because that's where I can interact with the audience directly. And I try to, comment back to every comment out there. And unless this show gets too big, that's what I'm going to keep doing. And if you are not into the video stuff, you're into the audio side of things, head on over to Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, or Spotify. While you're there, drop a follow. And if you like the show, drop a 5-star review oh so kindly. And be sure to hit that notification bell. We drop every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. But guess what? I've moved it up a notch. We're dropping 4 episodes a week now. And I don't know what's happening to me. But welcome, Nathaniel.
Thank you for having me on. Thanks for having me on, brother. It's great to be with you, and I'm excited to discuss the research.
Yes. I love having researchers on, man. I love having authors. I love having everyone on because I don't have to talk so much, and I just let my guests talk.
It's a good thing.
Yeah, man. So you've made your rounds, man. I've seen you on some pretty big platforms. Congratulations on that. That's really awesome, man. And I'm always happy for everyone's success and opportunities that are given to them. If you wouldn't mind, for the people that aren't familiar with you, what you do and where they can support you the most, if you could just kind of lay all that out for us.
Oh, Lord. Oh, to summarize, my name is Nathaniel Gillis. As you guys have deduced, I am a lecturer, an author, and a researcher. And I'm starting to say now that I'm an experiencer as well, which I am. That's how I got into this field. But I started out in demonology. As a pastor's kid, I grew up in a minister's home for 20 years, still grappling with what I encountered in my youth. And I kind of, for those who are familiar with Heiser's work and Chuck Missler and their entire theory, even Stephen Quayle and Tom Horn, the whole lot of them, that's how I got my feet wet in this research. And so that was my foundation. But since then, I've been working with researchers in the United Kingdom, trying to get an understanding of what's actually going on in these paranormal encounters, what's occurring, not just what the folklore has told us, but actually sitting down with the phenomenon, with technology, and saying, okay, are we getting any readings here? Is the phenomenon operating on different frequencies? If it is, how can we stop it? So that's really what I do. And if you guys want to follow me, if you guys do believe in my research, that would be awesome. You can go to parasymposia.com and you guys can sign up for early access to my upcoming paranormal platform. And if you guys also want to follow me on Instagram, that's fine too. So, but that's me.
Right on, man. Dude, I think there's a scientific aspect to this where the metaphysical realm it's barriered in between the subphysical realm, but there's something that happens there. And this is why I've researched a lot into the occult, because it seems like the occult uses the metaphysical world to manipulate the subphysical. So there's something going on there scientifically. I think the occult studies and the practices have a certain science to it. It's just something that's outside of our imagination because what we're taught in school and all this kind of stuff. But, what got you into all this?
I grew up in a haunted house and I was 8 years old. Yeah, right. Let's just break the so I was 8 years old, man, and I my parents had moved into a new house, but even actually the open house that we went and took a tour of, we're just hanging out in the home itself. I go into what would become my future room, and I'm looking around, and I noticed instantly when I walked in that there was this stench there. And it smelled like rotting or decomposing organic matter. Now, I didn't know that at the time. I was 8 years old, so I couldn't even probably strung that sentence together, for that matter. I was a gamer, so I'm just like, oh, man, this is a new house. It's a new environment. Let's figure things out. But I could feel like that not just sensing something was there, but I felt like I was being watched by a presence. And it was palpable. You could feel it in the room, and I can remember just feeling compelled. To this day, I don't know why, but I felt compelled to get on my hands and knees and look underneath the bed that was in the room, and that's when I came face to face with the full-bodied apparition of a little girl about around my age. She did not belong in the house. She didn't belong in the neighborhood. You know, she didn't live. We looked at the record. She didn't live in that area, at least that cul-de-sac. But once we got into the house itself, that's when things turned for the worse. I remember sitting in the pregnant silence of the night. My parents are asleep. I'm trying to fall asleep, and I'm a kid thinking about my school day the next day. And all of a sudden, I hear the heavy footfall of an entity. You could hear it displacing its weight in the living room, creaking its way into my room. And then once it entered my room, you could feel this just again, this pervasive presence. It was malevolent, deeply malevolent. And that's when my world was turned upside down because, it wasn't just like, it wasn't just one entity, right? The many masks that it wore, they varied. And so there were nights where I would wake up to a full-blown discussion going on above my head where entities were talking to each other. It's called direct voice phenomenon in parapsychology. But yeah, they were talking to each other, and I'm thinking, I am losing my mind, and trying to understand what's going on, because while I was experiencing the paranormal phenomena, I was also being like spiritually targeted by whatever this was. And so I was kind of slowly separating myself from my family. I'm not getting sleep at the house. So I'm literally crashing at school, which takes my grades, and it was just a very trying time for me, but that's my quote origin story. And it taught me a lot. And even in my career in the paranormal, I tell people that was the most malevolent entity I've ever encountered. And I've been in houses where they had to cut up the carpet just before I got there because of a murder took place. And so, yeah, so it's deep stuff. But whatever we're dealing with, at least it is malevolent. It is highly deceptive and incredibly self-serving.
Yeah, what do you think this realm consists of? At least from my
Mhm.
perspective, biblically,
Yeah,
and that whole idea, it's Eliud, it's the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim,
yeah.
it's the fallen angels, it's a lot of tricksters out there that can
Mhm.
manipulate how people perceive them. But what's your take with all that?
Well, I'm of the opinion that there exists a species here on the earth that is directly correlating, directly working with malevolence, with the darker side of the phenomenon. And I do believe this is a species that is embodied. Right now, even in evangelicalism and some of the research I've been doing, there is this kind of model that's inconsistent, mainly that, you know, we have the watchers that descended and they mated with women and they procreated with us. And but the Bible says they're bound in chains of darkness. And then we have the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, and they can't procreate because they're just spirits. And so somewhere in between the two, there is an embodied entity that has the ability and the freedom to procreate with us. And so that's what I'm looking at here. And it's the same thing within demonology, even the church fathers. And they had this discussion that none of them really agreed on anything. One said, okay, an incubus and a succubus was the same entity. And basically what it would do is it would go and steal the seed from a man and then take that to inseminate a woman. That was their best explanation.
Right.
And it never made sense to me because even in incubi literature, with Father Sinistravamino, he had cases where sigils were found in conjunction with secretions. So that's more like an occult practitioner that, and even in his mind, in his imagination, and this is fascinating to me. He said that, look, he's like, when you have the sigils and the secretions present on the same victim, to him, it proved the corporeality of the entity. It's not an apparition. It's something that has a body and that is somehow compatible with us in the way that you mingle seed together. So if there is self-replication going on even today, then we have to start asking ourselves different questions, at least from my perspective.
Yeah, yeah. So there's obvious ways that a lot of people, especially in the occult, right? But
Hmm.
another name that kind of rings a bell with all this is Solomon, right? And the fact
Right.
that there's sigils and all these different ideas of geometric shapes which have some sort of power to be able to bring these things into existence. Is it a free roam thing? Like they have the free will to come in and out when they please? Or is it something to where we open the door?
This is a been a profound question right now, like in the field. And I'm going to say this, that we have cases of the most devout Christians. Betty Luca was and I could say this because I grew up in this, okay? A tongue talking, holy rolling Pentecostal who prayed her children to the gift of tongues downstairs in her basement, only read the KJV, okay? And then one day, beings walked right through the wall of her home and placed all of her family in suspended animation.
Whoa.
Right. And this is the kind of the discussions I've been having behind closed doors with theologians and doctors of divinity. What do we do with that?
Right.
Because the questions, again, that evangelicalism is seemingly answering aren't even the questions being asked. They're not. Like if we get into the Collins Elite research, by the way, it's Nick Redfern's book for those who are going to be watching. Nick Redfern's book, The Final Events. These were, well, if you believe the ufologists, right? Well, they were just a bunch of religious zealots who are projecting their worldview upon their data. Not really. Because what they were doing, again, is they were investigating any and all occult connections between ufology and esotericism. They said, okay, like what's going on here? Well, they were not interrogating, but, investigating and talking to different experiencers. And they got a hold of a witch who was a contemporary of Aleister Crowley, who had actually lived in England and had lots of dinners and even just evenings with Crowley. And Crowley would come over and share his research with her, but her name was Sybil Leek. Only this time, Sybil Leek had moved from the UK to Los Angeles, and now here comes the Collins Elite researchers to her door. They sit down with this lady and they ask her, can you contact one of these entities that Crowley was in contact with? And certainly she did. She goes into her trance, and all of a sudden, a deep, raspy voice begins to echo out of her. His name was Coxulicum. Coxulicum begins to answer their questions, but he has a point to make. He said, number one, we rule the space you cannot see. We rule it. And so they're going through these different case studies of near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences. They go through Tammy Stone's case, who was an experiencer who pulled over at a dirt road. She saw a craft hovering above her vehicle, and as soon as she made a conscious connection with it, now she's bilocating. She's out of her body looking down at her body. Then they go into Paul Garrett's study, who was a part-time magician and painter, who in a near-death experience, he's out of his body and he's watching a crowd of people as these metallic objects are hovering above them, and they're hitting them with lights. And out of the bodies of these individuals comes a ball of light, descends into the craft, and the craft leaves. Their conclusion, again, and this is being missed both by the sacred and the secular, their conclusion was not evangelicalism. It wasn't fundamentalism. It had nothing to do with eschatology. Their conclusion was, number one, there is a species that exists in the afterlife and that is harvesting human consciousness at the moment of death. Now, when our government approached them after their research was finished, they said, okay, would you like to bring on disclosure? Would you like to bring about disclosure in the world? And the Collins Elite were adamant. Absolutely not. So my point here in this is, okay, I grew up in evangelicalism. If their model was evangelical, that would be called evangelism. in the form of disclosure. Everything we believe has been confirmed by the phenomenon, right? So here's what you guys have to do. What happened was they locked down disclosure and went basically full orthodox. Because whatever they experienced, whatever, not just experienced, whatever they're researching, pushed them into a model of the phenomenon they were unprepared for. And so what I'm looking at here, at least with some of the data, is that on one side, you have entities that say, okay, I seemingly need permission. On the other side, we do have entities that'll just, and this is tough for people to realize and comprehend, but it's almost like they place our species in suspended animation. And it's not just a one-of case. And so the questions that I've been asking myself now, and even some of the researchers I'm working with, are like, how do these entities have that much control over the construct? Unless on one side we have angels, and on the other side we have demons, right? That would be a more along the lines of my model right now.
Yeah, yeah. And so, you know, where does sigils and pentagrams or
Yeah.
this kind of stuff come into play with this?
So long ago, Kenneth Grant wrote a book called Outside the Circles of Time, and he had created a tradition called Typhonian Thelema. It was an off branch. Some people would call it a heretical off branch of regular Thelema. Anyways, in this book, he talks about how there would come a time with the phenomenon where it would evolve to where entities that would have in times past been called deities or demigods or quote old gods, as Tom DeLonge would call them, they would no longer want to be defined as that. They would be more defined as extraterrestrials or interdimensionals. And at the same time, though, he said they will still require worship. They will still want altars built. And in addition to that, these are the entities people are in contact with during abductions. And so I'm doing that research, right? And I'm thinking, well, this kind of fits my model a lot, not even kind of, but a lot. What is this guy actually saying? And out of nowhere, he hits me right in the face and says, and by the way, we know they're working through sigils and we actually have them in our possession. That's when I went, oh no, what have I been missing here? And then I start going into just these skin anomalies found on experiencers. And then I get into cases of my own and of Dr. Turner's where individuals believed, see, the interface the phenomenon was using was extraterrestrial. That's a key point with Kenneth Grant's work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're going to be extraterrestrial. But even though the interface was extraterrestrial, these experiencers were waking up with sigils on their bodies. Now, the reason we know they're sigils is not just the shape, it's not just the symbolism. I'm starting to finally, after about 2 years of analysis, get down to the raw data of a sigil I've collected on a man's chest. It's an overarching Egyptian hieroglyphic. It's a Star of David, and then underneath it there seems to be a name underneath it, and it looks to be a medieval seal. And what we're thinking now is that we have the name of the entity the seal belongs to, which, by the way, I don't like.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want that, And so when people say, Nathaniel, why don't you just release all the data? No, because I don't know how powerful they are. Number one. Number two, people can misconstrue it. Or people could even employ these same sigils to contact these entities, to bring them into this dimension even more. And so I have to be very careful with the way I present this. But that's what they're doing. They're interfacing as extraterrestrials, but also employing biosigilization. And so that's why, again, that early demonologists wrestled with whether or not we were dealing with demons or a species of embodied practitioners that were working with them, right? And then that's why we kind of landed the incubi literature once again, where secretions and sigils were both present. And
Mhm.
so there remains a species here that's unquantifiable.
Yeah. So would it be like a doorway, or is this
Yeah.
something uh, where it's almost like, I don't know, like the sigil is a car for the entity to be
Yeah.
able to transport in and out. I don't know.
And, well, it's an anchor, it's a seal. It, in many cases, these seem to be results of rituals. Kenneth Grant's model was like, yeah, these are practitioners. They are old, right? They're ancient practitioners, but they're dimensional. And what we see are the results of rituals they're performing on individuals. And I can go in this area too, because I think it's a massive data point where in the 1970s and 1972, even in the USSR, they were performing rituals having to do with psychic imaging and psychic projection. And so they had taped a blank photograph paper, placed it rather inside an envelope, and taped that envelope to the head of a practitioner. Yeah, this is declassified by the CIA in '02. Well, they would take this individual, place them in a controlled laboratory. They would say, okay, we want you to project your consciousness. Again, this is an embodied human practitioner. We want you to project your consciousness and your intent onto this photograph paper. We're hoping that through this ritual, we can change energy into matter. We can change intention into the tangible. And through the ritual, it changes from information into something we can actually measure and touch from
Golly.
the intention of the practitioner. And so they went from left to right. Okay, the first image, the first symbol we want you to put into this paper is this. And sure enough, they went down the line, turn on the lights on, take the envelope off the forehead, pull it out, and there they were. Imperfect, but there they were from left to right. And so they were like, oh my God, this is astounding. This is astounding. We didn't know you could do this. They did. The others did. We didn't know you could do it. So that's when they said, okay, we're going to put distance between you and the envelope. And so they moved it about 20 feet. Same ritual performed. We want you to focus your attention on the envelope, project your consciousness. We're going to change energy and information into matter. Now, the only variable that it's fascinating, the only thing that occurred differently, I should say, is that in between the practitioner and the envelope was a biofield that manifested from the person. It's a translucent cloud of energy. Now, within that translucent cloud of energy were the intentions of the practitioner, right? And so they watched as that biofield begins to move, slowly descends down upon the envelope. They waited a few minutes. They said, okay, turn the lights on. We're going to go for it. They pick up the envelope, pull out the paper, same manifestation, 20 feet apart.
Oh, wow.
Right. It's fascinating stuff. And so that's when they realized that with the intention, between the intention of the practitioner and the envelope, they had created the biofield. Within the biofield was the intention, the purpose, the consciousness, and the will of the practitioner. So we have cases right now, and this gets back to Dr. Carla Turner's research, and this is one of mine that I've worked with as well, of hers too. We've worked together on that independently. She's been deceased, but they came to me afterwards. Where the mother was sleeping in the living room at night, the son and the father are watching cartoons, and at the corner of their eye, they see a biofield manifest in the room. And it starts to hover, and it moves over the sleeping mother. It descends down upon her, just like it descends down upon an envelope. Now, she wakes up about 45 minutes to an hour later, terrified. She's like, I was just abducted by, and here's Kenneth Grant, right? Aliens, extraterrestrials. The problem was that she was covered from head to toe with sigils.
Oh.
Now, my point here is that understanding the experiment within the biofield, changing energy and information into matter. In theory, if that practitioner wanted to be perceived as an extraterrestrial, that intention would have been built into that biofield. So it would have landed upon the experiencer. And then you would have, this is fascinating, you would have the archetype switching, where the experiencer would say, I perceived it to be an extraterrestrial. Why? Because that's how the practitioner wanted to be perceived as. And number two, the sigils were discovered on her body. Why? Because that was built into the information. That became matter once it landed upon her. So whatever we're looking at here, it does seem to be more along the lines of a species of practitioners. Now, what would that be? I do believe that is technology, a technology of consciousness, like as Peter Levenda has often mentioned. But whatever we're dealing with is toying with that. And I do believe that in many abduction cases, and there are some scientists that are coming out more and more of this data as well, that a lot of these aren't bodily abductions. They're out-of-body abductions. And even so much now where it's, and I don't know how this works or even what this means, but the person's laying in bed or they're actually being observed by a family member during the time they said they're abducted. Now, when they get back into their body, they're having the same scoop marks as a person who was abducted in their body. So there's something going on here, and it seems to me that the early demonological position is being highly validated right now in the field. I've talked to people who think that it's cutting edge research, Nathaniel, to say, hey, a lot of this seems to be a spiritual attack, or it seems to be something within consciousness and in the mind. Okay, that's cool. But that's kind of what demonology said, right? Where it's like, yeah, they have the ability to trigger bilocation, and they are sigilizing people. So it was at that point that I realized that if these are sigils, then why are we seeing some of them underneath the skin? Why are we seeing some of them moving to the surface? And then why are we seeing others on the surface as burns? And that's when this case study really came to the fore, because the individual told me that first these appeared underneath my mother's skin. Then they moved to the surface. And by the time we got her to the hospital, they looked to be like scratches or burns. So what that does is it turns, at least from my perspective, turns a lot of these case studies upside down. Because if I was just a ufologist that had no background, right, in occultism or esotericism, and I go there and I see burns on the body, I wouldn't realize, I had no idea that that was in the third stage of manifestation.
What do you think's leaving it behind? Do you think it's like an
Yeah.
magnetic field or something
In
involved
some
in this?
cases, absolutely. Yeah. And in many cases we have, this gets back to Project Alton and McClellan's elite research, but there is an exact energy signature about it, and whatever's going on though, again, and I have to harp on this, unfortunately, is we, not you and I, but people in the field have imagined in their mind, they have this kind of thing, almost a fetish with like, oh, it's got to be horns and hoofs. That's form. That's just form. And what we know about the phenomenon is that it will sacrifice form if it can get function. So it will become, okay, I'm Dear Aunt Edna. It won't appear as horns and hooves. So people are expecting horns and hooves, but they're getting Dear Aunt Edna. They're being deceived, right? Because again, they're stuck, and I was too, because I grew up listening to Odyssey and everything. I was a church boy through and through. And that's what I thought, right? Well, if it's a demon, it's going to look horns and hooves, and that's it. Demonic, again, is a function as much as it is a form. And if we lose ourselves chasing the form, we're going to miss the exact function of this phenomenon. And that's why I and others have made the decision, okay, look, let's go investigating, right? Let's capture these energy signatures. Let's watch this in real time, because it's one thing, again, to know the literature. It's another thing to say, listen, we know it's a vehicle, but we still have to lift up the hood to see how this is actually operating. And that's why, thankfully, God's put me in a position, right, to be in contact with researchers from all across the world that have different worldviews. That's a key point, by the way, for everybody watching. We're not dogmatists. That everybody has different worldviews, but we're coming to the same conclusions.
Mhm.
And that is that whatever this is, they do want worship. The phenomenon is working with them as some kind of preternatural consciousness. And what we're trying to do now is to sit with the phenomenon, not conjure it, by the way, but if it's present, we want to run tests on it. We want to measure it. We want to quantify it as much as we can. Because it's like you said earlier, this isn't just esotericism. It's not just spirituality, right? There are mechanisms to this that the phenomenon weaponizes against our species. And if we can, and we can actually collect enough data to say, okay, these are the questions we should be asking.
When I think of some of this stuff, it kind of makes me think, what Nimrod was trying to do with the Tower of Babel, or why
Yeah.
he was uniting everyone together under a united collective language, and the fact that anything that they were going to be able to imagine to do, they were going to be able to do it. Like God
Yeah.
says this, and this is why he had to come down, confound the language, destroy the tower, and all this kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And then when I see that and I look at today, especially the newest thing that's kind of now making its rounds around YouTube videos, the internet, and TED Talks and all this stuff. It's quantum
Mhm.
computing,
Yeah.
and it's a wild concept. It has to deal with the subatomic structures that are around us, and qubits and all this kind of stuff. You think they're trying, and plus with CERN, I mean CERN's doing
Yeah.
something too,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
The CERN is also involved with D-Wave. D-Wave is talking about quantum chips and, how to bring in entities in some sort of way.
Mhm.
Um, what do you think's going on in our world?
I think that we are being highly manipulated by another intelligence. You know, Getting back to like Richard Banderick, and I mentioned this in times past, but I want to bring it home even further in this interview. Richard Banderick, now in 2025, he is an aerospace CEO. He has his own company, but back 30, 40 years ago, he had contracted with our federal government to go out to gifting fields and collect metamaterial left by the phenomenon. And he said that there were two characteristics that blew his mind. Number one, they knew where it was, but once they got a hold of it, once they had it in their hand, it blended in with its environment. So if it was on the ground, you couldn't see it unless you knew exactly where it was, and you'd have to go
Chameleon.
right there. Chameleon, absolutely. And that's first characteristic. The second characteristic was that once you hold it in your hand, if it was not designed for you, like if it wasn't really meant for you, it would dissolve into some kind of dust or powder. When you look at both of those, his conclusion was that we are being manipulated by something. We're being manipulated by something that does not have the ability to create matter. Get passionate. We're being manipulated by a species that wants us to think it can create matter, but we know it can't. It can, again, the devil only uses God's ruins. That's what we've always been taught. And so even with some of the apports that we're discovering in homes and in parapsychology, they are designed to replicate or to be a replica of actual matter. But the isotopic ratio, they're not the same. And so what we have is a phenomenon that is manipulating not reality, but at least manipulating matter that already exists, reconfiguring it, introducing it into our reality to make us believe that it's in control of the construct. Number two, it's doing that in order to anchor itself into this environment. My buddy Steve Mayer is a mentor and a dear friend. Him and Barry Fitzgerald's research regarding apports was a game changer for me. And I can't get it out of my head. Like I I've done probably 30 interviews this year. And I mean, almost every time I'm like, oh, by the way, and people hate it, right? Because they follow my research religiously. They're like, Nathaniel, you just told me this last night, man. And I'm like, I know, because I got to get people to understand this. But they're having cases where, apports were manifesting in homes, and they had no, like, what's going on here? Oh, this didn't even belong in the household. The family never even purchased it, right? And so they began to test these objects. And one of them was like 3 or 4 different coffee mugs. The phenomenon took one of them, left the rest. That coffee mug was searched for months, everywhere in the home. Finally, it shows up in the kitchen right where they would have seen it. So here it is. Well, he tested it. Steve took it to a laboratory, tested it, and it had a different isotopic ratio than the others it allegedly came with. So the question arose, was that the same coffee mug the phenomenon took? Or was it something the phenomenon replicated and just put a replica back into our reality? Again, they're
Interesting.
not creating matter, they're manipulating it.
Mhm.
And so that's when the next step of their research took place, where they had another case study. An apport manifested in the home, and they said, okay, we're going to run an experiment. It was a highly volatile household. The phenomenon was very much present. And so they took the port back. They placed it in a storage space. The phenomenon dissipated like a cloud in the sky, just completely gone. The family calls them celebrating. Oh my God, we're going to go out for dinner. We're not getting scratched anymore. There's no orbs. There's no shadow figures. What did you guys do? And they said, got bad news for you. The phenomenon has not left. The apport left. The phenomenon's returning. Well, how do you know? They said, we're going to run a test. They brought the apport, put it back in the home. Within 24 hours, the phenomenon had reconnected to it and was now incarnating and manifesting in the home. So that's when they realized that what the phenomenon does is it will manipulate matter, will take something out of a home. For instance, I got an Altoid here, okay? It'll take an Altoid out, replace it with matter it's manipulated, and it's anchored itself to that construct. And we would not know it because it blends in, Richard Banderick, it blends in to our environment. So the other day, Steve and I were talking, because we do what are called NHI sessions weekly. And we all know the phenomenon evolves. It evolves according to our awareness of it. So he and I and a couple other researchers, in order to stay ahead of the phenomenon, we have to do 2 times the amount of research, hoping that we get a step ahead, hoping that it won't realize where we are. Well, suddenly, out of nowhere, Steve drops a bomb on me. He's like, oh, by the way, when we first got into the port research, he said we had the ability to bench test the replica with the authentic model. Because what happened was the phenomenon was taking objects that were of multiple objects purchased in a group, the coffee bugs. And he said the only reason we knew the replica was present is because we bench tested it against the real. So the phenomenon realized, uh-oh, I don't want you to do that. So now it began taking one of. There's nothing else to bench test this with. Why? Because the homeowner doesn't own anything like that. It's just one set of AirPods. So that's when it realized, I've got to update. It's a learning matrix. I've got to evolve. I do not want you to realize, right, that I'm replicating reality in your environment.
That's
So
so
that's
clever.
Is that not incredible? That's what bugs me, brother, when people are like, well, Nathaniel, just say they're unclean spirits and I'll sign off on your research. No, no. No, I mean, that's not just that, I should say. Whatever we're dealing with is highly technologically advanced. And it is manipulating our species. And it's, again, replicating portions of reality. So the questions, again, I think I said this early on in the interview, where like the questions I started out having, right, in the field when I first started, they're not at all what I'm asking today. The questions I'm asking today include one of the following, right? Are they replicating reality? How much of reality have they replicated in order to anchor themselves in our environment? What is actually going on? Whatever that is, I mean, we're barely scratching the surface of right now.
Yeah. There's so many layers to it too, I feel like.
Yeah.
One of those layers kind of being, UFOs and this phenomenon.
Mhm.
What's your take with that? Do you think that these are also kind of like what you're saying? They're manipulating the material realm. Um,
Yes, that is another Collins elite motif. So the Collins elite, their theory was that we're not just being manipulated by these entities, that the phenomenon will almost manifest a form of technology just enough to deceive us, right? So, with respect to the Axelrod case study at Skinwalker Ranch, which I do now believe it was Jay Stratton. I'm still waiting for his book to come out, but I believe his name was Jay Stratton. But anyways, this researcher was on the premises at Skinwalker Ranch and he's investigating. He's not really investigating, right? He was sitting at the Pentagon. He's just watching everything, observing. They're actually doing the investigating. But as he's there in the middle of the night, he gets a phone call from his wife. Baby, you've got to get home right now. What's going on? Are the kids okay? Yeah. We're all healthy. Nobody's hurt. But as I was washing dishes, a bipedal wolf man looked at me through the window. It started haunting his family, staring at his kids at nighttime again. They go outside, and the children had witnessed it run up a tree, right? There are two contradicting evidences there. Number one, it did look like it climbed up the tree, right? They had claw marks where the bark had been scratched off by something massive and powerful. The problem is that once it ran up the tree, it disappeared. So what is that? So the Collins Elite case, they would approach that case study by saying, well, that wasn't a real entity. That's why it disappeared. It wanted to appear real to us. And so it fabricated a bunch of evidence, right? The scratching. That is the only thing it could do in this environment was scratch. Everything else was a construct. And so that's when you kind of go into are some of these UAPs, are they physiological constructs on the part of the phenomenon? Now, for those who don't know what that is, let me break it down. That would mean something like this. Like you are driving in your car, right? And you see another vehicle with your eyes, right? And your car has a sensor and you get too close to it, your alarms start going off, boop, 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 and then you're like, okay, that's pretty cool. And then you start to realize that that is not real. It's a physiological construct that is designed to make you think it is real. It's something that exists in this environment. And so we have these case studies where it's not just that the fact that it's manifesting these entities or these craft, but even the technology they want us to think they have doesn't exist. To where, like, there are cases where the UAP manifests to witnesses and they have rivets and screws on the side of it. No, you're not going to go, right? Mach 2 with screws and rivets inside of it. That's old technology, even in the States. We know not to do that. And so it's like, okay, if you're so technologically advanced, why don't you know that? And so a lot of these do seem to be some kind of a program to where when it manifests in our environment, it's designed to make us think, again, it's extraterrestrial. It's some kind of, off branch or, some more advanced species on the earth. But that's not really what we're seeing, it does seem to be more like a program. Now, I will say this. That's one side of the coin. This gets back to Jacques Vallée. Jacques Vallée said recently that there seems to be the physical and the non-physical. And he's separating the both of them. They're different they're different phenomena, different entities. I would suggest that what we're looking at are the same. It's the same phenomenon. Case in point, Dr. Gary Nolan had a case study in France where a young boy was in his car with his family. He's looking up above in the sky and he sees a craft. He sees it. he starts to describe what he's seeing to his mother. Well, it's 2024, 2025. We have really nice cameras on our iPhones now. So she does what everybody else would do, snaps a photograph of it. The problem is the craft she took a picture of did not match the description her son gave her. So it does exist. But what's happening is it is the observer effect, where by the time we make a conscious connection with it, it collapses itself into something else. We think that exists when something else is actually present.
That's kind of wild, huh?
Yeah,
I mean,
it's absolutely wild.
it's like, so we would both have two different perspectives of it. It's just depending how we're interacting with the quantum mechanics of it,
Absolutely.
maybe.
And I'll go a step further here, where the evidence suggests that whatever we're dealing with has the ability to control the variable, to where if it wants us to collapse it, right, it would. It will allow itself to collapse into that archetype or to that image at will. If it does it, it won't. And so now again, we're asking, what could do that? What has the ability to do that? And so this is why, again, people are so attracted to form, right? It's got to be this, because it looks like that to me. Why? Well, how about this one? I saw it. I know what it was. No, we don't. No, we don't. And this gets it's sad, but even in parapsychology, we have that with apparitions, where the Lord Arbok is sitting there with the apparition. He's looking at it as an apparition. On camera, it's a ball of light. That's where I'm going. So, right. So even the Skywatcher right now, the Skywatcher movement, in their interviews, they've been saying to us, and it took me a while to get it. I had to replay it, and I'm like, oh my God, this is quite obvious. He goes, one of them said, we're having a hard time understanding what we're observing when we're observing it. So, right, there's a coordination here, because it's like, okay, if I'm observing it, I don't know what I'm observing. Why? Because I'm observing it at that point.
Are these watch parties, are they like the ones ran by like a Chris Ryan Bledsoe or the CE5 movement, Stephen Greer and people like that? Okay.
Absolutely. And I've worked with people, there's things I can't say now because they swore me to secrecy, but here's the thing, like, the phenomenon, after about 20 to 25 seconds, has the ability to completely manipulate our perception of it. Completely. And so when people are like, I want to go out and conjure the phenomenon, I want to go contact them. Okay, fine. I wouldn't recommend it, obviously, but you need to be prepared for the fact that you have 20 seconds. Once the phenomenon manifests, you have about 20 seconds before the phenomenon induces you into theta brainwave activity, and you are at their complete mercy. If they want you to remember something, you will. If not, they'll wipe it, or they'll replace it with a screen memory. Now, they will do something for you or to you, right? And that's the thing. What am I seeing that may not be real, but it doesn't mean something doesn't exist out there? It is. Something is real. Something is wearing that mask when we interface with it. And so I've had cases of people performing CE5 and having apparitions manifest to them at the house. I have a case study right now that and I'm still working on, where the individual performed the entire CE5 protocol, had an encounter with dolphin-like entities. And then for the next 2 months, this individual has a symbol in her lower vision of her right eye, goes to the eye doctor. The eye doctor gives her a clean bill of health. It was a supernatural symbol given to her after the protocol. So, yes. Now, the problem we're having, at least within ufology, is that one side is extraterrestrial. Behind closed doors, they do know, and I've had conversations with people that you could claim as whistleblowers, where, yeah, they're not really extraterrestrial. It's more like you're involved in a mystery school where whatever you're being told on the outside is absolutely nothing compared to what's going on the inside. And so, and I've had one conversation with an individual that told me in no uncertain terms, I was catatonic one night after a conference because we had just discussed with everybody there how they're extraterrestrial. We go out to dinner at an individual's home. The first thing we see in the home is an altar they've built to these entities.
Oh
So
gosh.
what this appears to be, yeah, it's a mystery school here. And I'm
Right.
not saying, right, it's a mystery. And these individuals are being initiated into it. You know, like it goes even back to Matthew Roberts, who was a gimbal whistleblower. He was on a naval ship and he watched the gimbal UAP. Yeah, he went back to his quarters, back to his home. A voice comes to him and begins to give him a bunch of occult authors and a bunch of occult books to read.
Right. Right.
And
There's a mystery religion behind this aspect.
there is. Yeah, he even wrote a book called Initiated.
Oh
You
gosh.
know, and people are like, Nathaniel, and this is frustrating. Nathaniel, you're just projecting your worldview. First of all, you don't know my worldview. I'm giving you my professional opinion here, right? And second of all, I didn't write Ryan Bledsoe's tweet when he told people we pray to the orbs.
I saw you post that the other day. Yeah.
Great, right? Well, I got frustrated one night. I'm like, you know what? Fine. I'll push back a little bit. But look, you know, don't tell me something. Okay, don't tell me I'm not seeing what I'm seeing. How about that? Right? Because there's many ways to say that. But don't tell me, I'm not seeing this, because it's blatantly obvious now. The problem is that it's becoming so obvious that now they start realizing, oh, wait a minute, maybe I am being played, because it kind of sounds like, right, everything I've been told it was. And so that's where I'm coming from. And it's not that I think I'm 100% correct. I hope I'm not. I do. I don't want this to be specifically, in respect to the symbol. I don't want this to be a medieval seal.
Uh-huh.
I don't want that to be an entity's name, because it puts me in the position of people saying, okay, I want to see it. And if you don't show it to me, you're a fraud. And it's like, well, what if I do show it to you? What are the implications? Like what's going to happen here? So it's an uncomfortable position for me to be in. But at the same time, we're getting closer and closer and closer to the truth. So I'm excited about that
Yeah,
part.
and I think what's going on too with a lot of these programs, I call them programs because
Mhm.
it seems like it's kind of culty. So people go and they gravitate to these Skywatch,
Yeah.
congregations and stuff like this. But these people, especially, are being manipulated by these forces. I'll just call it,
Of
and I
course.
think the Bible actually says, the God of forces, where this is like the spirit of the world or darkness, and this
Mhm.
is the things that take place in this realm. And I think that there's a few things involved with this. It's not only a UFO religion that's starting to kind of be pushed into culture, and it's even being pushed into religions, because now the religions have to kind of interpret this and kind of mix it into their stuff. But another thing I found very consistent with a lot of this is the lady,
Mhm. Yep.
the
The
divine
Thor.
feminine. And what's your
Mhm.
take with that kind of with those subjects?
Uh, well, the problem is here again. Oh Lord, the thing is, and I've brought this up on Tony Merkel's show as well, where they wouldn't have taken the late Michael Heiser and said, "Hey, Dr. Heiser, I'm Hathor. And by the way, I'm also Mother Mary. And by the way, I'm also the Holy Spirit." Because Michael Heiser, and guys, Jason Giorgiani also pointed this out. Right. So, and he's not even in our wheelhouse right now. You know what I mean? He's not even in this this worldview that we're talking about. But even he noticed, guys, he's like, I used to teach religious courses in college. No. Why? Because it's not really relying on data. It's not trying to be historically accurate. Right. It's appearing to Chris Bledsoe, who was like, okay, well, that kind of makes sense. Michael Heiser would have probably baptized them until they could come out of the water, right? You're a Thor, okay,
Yeah.
right? But like, oh my God, the Thor is dead. No, I'm just kidding. You know, rest in peace, Thor. No, um,
uh,
but
that's funny.
he would have saw through that. Why? Because he would have known that's kind of impossible. You can't be all of them. Because why? Because all of them existed and they had their own beliefs and worldviews. If you are all of them, the only way that would work is if all of you did exist and all of you had the same worldviews. But that's how the phenomenon works, right? I'm dear Aunt Edna until I demonstrate a pathology that's inconsistent with who I was in life. Oh, that's when you realize, no, you're a program. You are a program that are trying to deceive me into initiation. You want me to become your prophet. So much so that the very first lecture he ever gave, a voice came out of him that was not his. Why? Why?
Mhm.
Because it was initiatory. It was initiatory. And so that was a loaded question, brother. So I got really triggered there. I
No,
apologize.
you're
But
good.
yeah,
You're good. I love it. Well, there's a common theme with these apparitions with
yeah.
the divine goddess. It's appeared to many different people, especially people that have been very important into our history. John Dee, George Washington.
Hmm.
I mean, Egyptian pharaohs, Roman emperors. They always are approached by this divine feminine entity, which I believe it's this god of forces of the darkness trying to manipulate mankind to push towards more of a Gnostic view of theology rather than a
Yeah.
biblical theology, if that makes any sense.
Well, the same people that are promoting the divine feminine have a hard time defining what it is.
Right, right. Well, that's a good point. Well, and I think that's because one of the main aspects of that is balance, and it's
It is.
you
Uh,
know,
it just gets it gets so convoluted where I get sick of it, and it's like, oh, that is kind of funny, divine feminine. Okay, you know, it doesn't make any sense. But what people have to do is they have to go into philosophy. They have to look at it and say, well, we need the divine feminine. It's all right. And it's the same argument, people, and I love Steiner, I do. And Christ consciousness, okay, we can go in that direction as well. But people say, well, we have to have divine feminine because they're raising our consciousness. Okay, how do we quantify consciousness? How do you measure it? What is that exactly? Can you define it? No, how do you know it's being raised? Now, if you're going to tell me they're going to raise our awareness of things, that's fine. That's fine. But just because you're raising my awareness of a thing, that doesn't tell me the definition or source of the thing I am now aware of. It's
mhm,
just, right, okay, my eyes are adjusting to darkness. So I'm looking again at the source and what it does appear, at least to me, to be. I sound like you know,
yeah,
one of those
yeah,
childhood books, right? It appears to me again that we're not reading some kind of science fiction novel. We're right back where we thought we were in biblical antiquity. We're dealing with the high groves and the altars of sacrifice, the rituals that the phenomenon wanted in order to manifest in this dimension. And even if you look at like Tim Taylor and the host of scientists who are conjuring the phenomenon, they're pointing us in the direction of transhumanism. And
mhm,
I love Gary Nolan. I know that's his kind of feel too, but I'm just going to kind of take my chunk of that for a fleeting moment and say, yeah, so they're right. They're right. It's not an accident. Pasuka's new book, respectfully, Dr. Pasuka, rather, her new book is I'm hearing is going to be about the origins of AI. And I'm thinking, oh, that's incredible. So you have Diana Pasuka writing a new book about AI and where it came from. And she's saying that it came from a download.
huh,
So I say download, right? And then you go into Peter Thiel, who suddenly is now teaching a lecture series on the Antichrist. And so I'm thinking at first blush, that's pretty cool. I grew up in church. I've heard about the Antichrist since I was in, you know, Sunday school. Oh, biblical eschatology. That's cool. And so I'm going into these lectures. It's like, okay, I'm really anxious to hear what this billionaire intellectual has to say. No, his whole point was, look, you as a species, we as a species need to embrace AI, or you will become a part of the Antichrist movement. That's almost the flip side of real accurate biblical eschatology.
yeah,
So if we kind of take both of these concepts, put them on a whiteboard, on one hand, you have artificial intelligence originating from some kind of download, part of the phenomenon. And you have somebody else who's in charge of Palantir, who's working directly with Israel and the White House, who's saying, by the way, guys, this download that gave us AI, if you don't follow AI, you're a part of the Antichrist movement. that's when I was like, "Oh, no."
Right, right. They're
Not
flipping the
good.
script, you know, that
Exactly right.
they're
Not good at
flipping the
all.
script a little bit, and that's purposely done because they want people to take a wide road into this. They want people to get corralled into this futurism of this AI of artificial
Yeah.
intelligence, because I do think at some point the technology is what's going to it's what's going to download that false spirit of the world or that energy into us to make
Right.
us as gods. It's almost like when you see in Eastern mysticism, you have Hindus or even Buddhists. You know, they're bringing in the Kundalini so that it goes through their chakras and then they get the
Mhm,
Kundalini awakening. I think they want technology to be migrated with humans so that
mhm,
humans now or the user can access that energy when they choose to, or maybe
mhm.
it just happens as soon as you get it. I don't know. But
Yeah.
it's to where now they can download this force into them and now they're kind of awakened because they chose to take this mark.
Yes, and I'm to the point now where I know our government knows things that we don't. That goes without saying. Even most of the information I'm getting now is open sourced. But with that said, if you're looking at the technology we have right now on the earth, I'm afraid that we don't know what we don't know because it's possible that if we actually sat down with them and they disclosed exactly where they got the technology that we may even be talking on right now, they would probably come out and say, yeah, and if you don't like where it came from, then stop using it.
Yeah.
Or, and that could not just go just for, technology itself, but even the pharmakeia, where it's like, okay, we got that from them as well. And we're saving lives. It's you kind of get in this philosophical argument with them
Right.
to where it's like, do the ends justify the means? So it's going to be, again, I grew up in this. So people are thinking, well, it's just going to be as simple as saying, okay, that's fallen, this is ascended. No, it's not. Absolutely not. Because, it's going to be infinitely more difficult to source this out and say, okay, where is this coming from? And is this what we should be doing?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I like your mindset, man. I like how you think because you're an investigator. You're questioning these
Yeah.
things. You're questioning the narrative and also the things that are interacting with our material world, which is important because a lot of the people are not questioning it. They're actually just going with it. And I feel
Right.
like that's what's the problem with this whole thing. And it's creating a big
It is.
movement, man.
It is. It is. Yeah, it's a bunch of merchandise with aliens on them. And it's like, okay, go build an altar to an alien. Nathaniel, why do spirits need spaceships? I'm like, "Oh, why do aliens want altars?" So, again, somewhere in between both models, right? There's the correct one, and that's what I am in the pursuit of. So,
Right on, man. Well, hey, look, man, we put an hour of work in, and
yes, we
hey,
did.
I'm pretty sure the audience is pleased. And so, brother, thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for coming on the show, man. Real quick,
Thank
for
you.
the people that are still hanging out with us, if you
Yeah.
wouldn't mind, just shoot your plug and where the people can support you the most, man.
So you can go to my YouTube channel, subscribe. It's under Nathaniel Gillis. You can follow me on Instagram under Nathaniel Gillis. Um, if you're really ambitious, you can go to my new paranormal platform called Parasymposia, and you can sign up for early access to it there. Thank you for having me on, sir. It's great to be on with you, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Yes, sir. Thank you as well, man. And before you go, hey, if there's a quick, if you could just share a quick positive message with the
Yeah.
audience, man, and then I'll get into the next segment.
Yeah, I think they're playing by different rules because they're playing a different game. Thus far, what we have had is we believed was a chessboard. We thought, okay, they're playing chess. No, the board's the same. They're just playing checkers. And we didn't know that. No, the rules are different. Well, we still have the board. And so my point here is that they're everything we thought they were and more. We're not going backwards on this. We're actually expanding it and saying, yeah, they're everything we knew them to be. They're just better at it now. So that's what I would say.
Right on, man. Well, I appreciate you, man, and best just blessings and
Thank you.
best for you of what you got going on and everything like that. And I'll be sure to collaborate with you with the things that I create with this episode, shorts and all this kind of stuff. But Nathaniel Gillis,
All right.
everyone.
Thank you.
All right, Biblical Hitman debrief. Appreciate you, Nathaniel, for coming on the show, folks. That was interesting conversation. I think we got down to the nitty gritty on a lot of these things that we discussed. He's a man of research. He's got very interesting research at that. And we know that we're faced with a lot of these things that are thresholded up against the subphysical world, which then is connected to the physical world, and it's the metaphysical world, right? It's the world that we can't see, and there's really a lot of things to it. It's pretty complex. Again, like, we're physical beings that are trying to put these things together and trying to put these things in a perspective where we can understand it. But, understanding the spiritual world is not easy. It's pretty hard. And I think that that's why being grounded biblically, you can really build a certain discernment that helps you navigate in these fields. But we also know that it's not just the occultists. It's not just the New Agers. It's not just a lot of it's the same mystery religion with a different label on it, is what I'm trying to say. And they're infatuated with, um, you know, these things of the metaphysical realm. And I think there's some sort of worship behind it as well. I think that a lot of it is based off of experiences. And I think a lot of these people, why they choose to go down believing that these things of the metaphysical world have some sort of creator status or God status over us, is because of how the experiences that they've had in their lives, how it's impacted them. You got to understand, having UFO experiences, seeing cryptid experiences or apparitions, it's pretty intense. It's something that really can affect someone's thought process, how they think, and what they believe in. It's really something to be aware that it can manipulate how you think. And so that's why I think when we were getting into our discussions, where these things want us to perceive them in a certain way. And a lot of that has to wrap around the aliens, right? Aliens, extraterrestrials, and that concept, which I do think that is that's the avatar they want us to see them as, right? But it's not exactly who they truly are. I think that these things that we're dealing with are demons. I think that within that whole concept, I think there's a lot of other things that play into that. Obviously, it's a layered subject. It's not something that, you can just say it and cover it with one word. It's multi-layered. But if you can at least consist it under the demonic realm, I think that that gives it characteristics to being a deceiving entity. And when I say entity, I mean as a whole body, right? With however many layers there are to it. It's based off of deception. I think it's full of tricksters, and I think it's full of manipulators, and I think it's full of things that will pull you away from God, things that will pull you away from the Holy Spirit, the teachings of Christ, who Christ is, and the divinity of Him, and also to pull you into a different mystery religion. And I think that's what really is wrapped up entirely around this concept, is mystery religion. And you can see why mystery schools are based off of a lot of the things that we talked about in this episode, and why they love to get the downloads from this metaphysical world. They go into these astral projected realms, and they go there to receive knowledge. You have to understand too, a lot of this stuff is talked about in Genesis. Like, you have to understand Genesis, and especially Genesis, chapter 3. It's so elaborate but simple at the same time. And really what's going on is there's a conversation between mankind and the serpent. But then there's also a tree of knowledge of good and evil that's involved here. And you have to understand, if God told Adam something and gave him laws to obey by, God is teaching him the truth and teaching him the true uh, religion. I'm just using religion in this aspect for to compare it with the serpent's idea. But then you have the serpent, who's also going to be teaching a religion as well, and it's completely counterfeited and inverted from what God had taught. Like, when you actually line up Gnosticism next to Christian theology, it's the complete inversion. It is almost like they have totally switched roles with each player that pertains to the theology. For example, in the Christian theology, you've got God, Christ, you've got creation, you've got mankind, and you've got Lucifer being the god of this world. And the fact that Lucifer caused the fall of mankind, and so God sent Christ, his son, to earth to die for mankind, so that when you believe in him, you put your faith in him, you can go to heaven. You look at the Gnostic theology, and it really starts with this pleroma, this um, I think maybe the word is a monad or something like that. But there's basically like the Abraxas. The Abraxas is this this all God entity or whatever, and he created the archons, which one of the archons or the main archons is Sophia, right? But you can put Sophia kind of in the same column as God, but Sophia had Lucifer just under her, and was a messenger or someone that was a liberator, a savior of some sort, which then you can compare, you can see now the inversion of Christ, and then where you have Lucifer. But then you've got creation, then you've got mankind, and then the god of this world is the demiurge, and the demiurge is the one that put us within chains, put us within the garden, and was constricting us from really reaching our full potential of godhood, right? It's like they say that there's this spark inside of us, which is just such BS, in my opinion. It's just nothing more than what the serpent told Eve, you can be as gods. And so Lucifer was sent down by Sophia to mankind, to earth, to liberate us and to set us free from the uh, the handcuffs and the control of the demiurge, which is what they say is the God of the Old Testament. And so then you have the Abraxas, who then sends Christ to earth to also teach us once again how we can liberate ourselves from this. And so it's a twisted demonic theology, and it's what the whole world is moving to, believe it or not. It doesn't have to be specific in those matters. It is definitely something that is it's consuming the whole world. And if anything, each of the religions which are on this threshold, they're on this shelf. Okay. To me, it's the theosophical shelf. It's theosophy. It's H.P. Blavatsky's thoughts, where all of the religions, except for Christianity, of course, and Judaism, all the religions have this different point of view. They've got this different perspective. They all have kind of 10% right. And then you add them all together, they're all worshiping 100% of the same God. And so it's kind of wild when you have that threshold, you've got that shelf with all those religions on it. And what I believe the Antichrist, right, which is this Christ figure that's to come in the future, which some of them call him the second Buddha, right? The third, the predecessor of Buddha and Jesus Christ. It's like this world teacher that will take you to the road of Shambhala, and where there will be this gnosis that takes place between the Antichrist and this heavenly realm that's going to be established here on earth, right? Because that's kind of like gnosis. Gnosis is knowledge and everything like that, but it's also when you collaborate heaven and earth. And you see a lot of the Christian church today talking about these things, where we need to bring heaven on earth and all this, and I disagree with those things. I think we should, try to be obedient and live in the fruits of the Holy Spirit, which will naturally make things more peaceful. But this is a fallen world, and Jesus is coming back to judge this world. There is no bringing the heaven here and then making this place better. It's that this place will be done away with in the future, and there will be a new heaven and a new earth, and things have to get judged and taken care of and put away. So I think that the world religions, which are going to be united by this Antichrist, it's going to, and I even think Judaism at some point is going to be involved in this, right? What's very fascinating is he mentioned the Star of David almost, like it was like this sigil at some point, but I also think that that Star of David is occultic as well. If anything, it's the balance between man and woman. It's the triangle up and the triangle down just merged together. It's also the four elements of creation: air, water, fire, earth. And when you merge those together, all those four triangles together, it also gives you the image of, the Star of David. So there's an occultic idea. There's a cultic remnant behind this symbol, and I don't think it has anything to do with God. If anything, the Bible has discussed it and talked about that this symbol is the star of Remphan, and it's for a totally different God. Um, and so when all these religions come together, right? When this Messiah comes, he's a false Messiah. When he comes, he's going to bring everyone together in peace and unity. And uh, when the unity comes together, the balance will be restored. The balance is going to be restored between man and woman, and I think that's why we really see a lot today where man and woman are trying to be balanced in our culture. And it will throw off the order of things. It'll throw off how things are supposed to work, not only in the nuclear family, idea, but also just with things that go on in our fabric of society. Women have such a vital role in certain places in society and culture, and so don't men. So this is why things are ordered the way they are, because God intended it to be like this. But I think that when Satan comes, the Antichrist, I think that this is one of the things he's going to do. And pertaining to what eschatology you do subscribe to, if you think of just your view of things, just understand the unity and the balance is something that will take place in whatever eschatology you believe in. It's even if it's little season eschatology, you have to understand he's going to unite the whole world to go to war with Christ, right? So that's a characteristic that I'm really trying to warn people about, and I'm really trying to educate people about, where if you see unity and you see these terms, you see, even if you see the church talking about it, you have to kind of just stand back for a second and evaluate what is going on here. We see that there's a lot of denominations, and whenever how everything kind of started out is, Roman Catholicism was the root of a lot of this stuff. Obviously, the apostles were the root of the church. But talking about it from an empire standpoint, Catholicism was the root of what we see as Protestant Christianity, New Apostolic Reformation, even just kind of like the it's kind of like there was like a blast of multi different areas of Christianity that came from the Catholic Church. If you would imagine it like in a graph mindset, this almost like the Catholic Church would be at the top, and then there's just constant like triangle pyramid schemes that just branch off of it. And that's where we get a lot of the denominations, the Methodist Church, all this kind of stuff, whatever. And this is where a lot of things were broken away and compartmentalized to who decided to believe in this theology, this theology, this theology. What I see today, and I think that that was a good thing. I think that that's the characteristics of truth, is when it breaks up into multiple pieces like that. It's almost like it has an order to it, not an order as in like one, two, three, four, five, six, but an order to where I think this was, maybe purposely done by just how God wanted things intended to be. If anything, it's strayed away from unity. If you think of the Tower of Babel, Nimrod, and Babylon, God did the same thing to Babylon, right? So everything was under one head of things, and then it got confounded and broken up into multiple different cultures, languages, and just it spread across the world in that way. So that's kind of like what I'm getting to with this. Now, what's happening as we are living in in the time period we're in, God, it seems like we're seeing a reverse of that. We're seeing everything that was scattered from the Catholic Church is now coming back to the Catholic Church. And it's scary to me because I think that not only are there people in our legislation and our government and, all of those branches that are Catholics, and this is, again, like, this is no disrespect to anyone who's Catholic that watches this show or listens, but I do think that it's also, its base is mystery religion. Catholicism is mystery religion. It segues from truth and sound doctrine. So I think when I'm seeing everyone starting to come back to the Catholic Church, which you see especially with the New Apostolic Reformation, who is like the spearhead of mega Christianity today, especially with the Trump administration, even the person who's the head of his faith segment, or section, whatever. She's an NAR advocate, and she's also talking about ecumenicism and wanting to bring together all the denominations together. And then this will bring us back to the Catholic Church. You can even see this with a lot of pastors that are part of the New Apostolic Reformation, where they're constantly talking in their congregations about how they can get along and be universal with the Catholic Church. You got to understand too, the Catholic Church is a universal term. It's what it means. It means universal. So I think when you see what the Catholic Church is doing as well, you see that it's actually making it's trying to make um covenants, and it's trying to make agreements with Islam. It's trying to make agreements with Hindus and Buddhists and all of the Eastern religions that are out there as well, which if everything gets brought back into the Catholic head of things, I think it's just it makes it more organized and easier to now bring just the other few religions that are left around the world together. When you think of Catholicism, it's a mass amount of the religion today. If you were to break this stuff down in a pie chart and look at Islam, Catholicism, Judaism, and Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, you would see that Catholicism is probably the most populated one out of all of them. So it's something to look out for. I think it's something to be aware of and be cautious of, especially to question the narrative, question why churches are doing this. And I think that the enemy is at work behind the scenes of all of these different aspects of religion, trying to bring together a united system. And so, but hey, let's just keep our eyes up. Let's keep our hearts and minds in the direction of Jesus Christ. Let's try to be, obedient. Let's try to be also obedient to sound doctrine. The Bible is a supernatural event as well. The Bible itself is the Word of God. If you read John, the Gospel of John, especially the beginning, first chapter of it, tells you right there specifically what the Word of God is. Timothy talks about sound doctrine. The New Testament is all about sound doctrine. It's all about being obedient to the Word of God, trusting in it, because it is supernatural. It is God. So, with all that said, folks, thank you for being here, being a part of this community. I appreciate you very much. Obviously, everyone kind of knows what I'm going through. The show is also going through, um, you know, uh, it's process, it's growing process. The show itself is trying to be fractured by a lot of the enemy. So if you could just please pray for the show, I'd appreciate it. Please pray for me and my family and what we're going through. I'd appreciate that as well. I'm very grateful. My family has their health. Obviously, there are some health problems, but they're superficial at the moment. At least I think they're superficial. That's just a positive attitude. But, if you could just pray for us, what we're going through with our homestead and the building of our home and the property, it's really a tough situation. My poor wife, I can't believe she's going through this, that I've put her through this. But I do think that God is fine tuning us, is putting us through the fire, and is forging us. And so I think that we're going to grow from this process, and there's really nothing that could take us out um, in the future that comes from all this. Also, everyone that's part of the community, thank you so much for bearing with me and bearing with the show when it comes to ads. I deeply appreciate that. Again, it's the best way to really support the show. It's the only financial income that I'm able to sustain from this podcast. A lot of it, and I mean, if most of it goes to the overhead of this show, so it keeps the show going. And I deeply appreciate y'all. I have a love for y'all that do get through the ad space. I know there's some people that hate it. Some people do complain about it, and I'm sorry. I'm really trying to figure out something to fix that situation. I'm thinking about, I've never been somebody who's been financially hungry over this. Yes, it's business oriented. It's a model for that. Uh, because I would love to do something to where my wife doesn't have to work a job and she could stay home and cater to my children and also cater to the home and also just just enjoy her life in that way. I'm the kind of guy that gives everything. I give everything for my family. If anything, I'm okay with God putting me through the ringer, putting me, scar me up, man, because I'm just trying to make life better for the people that are around me, and the closest ones to me are my wife and my children, my child. Right, I don't have children yet, but um, just one little girl who's crazy. But I'm trying to really give them a wonderful life, and if I've got to sacrifice everything to do that, that's what I'm gonna do. But I have much love and appreciation for everyone that's getting through the ad space. I'm thinking about creating a Patreon, so it's something that will be better for y'all maybe if you want to support the show. It's definitely something where the ads won't be there, and I think that might be some relief for people out there that like the show. They just hate the ads. But with that said as well, if you want to support the show, head on over to YouTube and smash that subscribe button, like the show and share it with your friends, and drop a comment because I like communicating with y'all. It's the best place to do that. It's the best place where I can directly engage with the audience. And I love engaging with y'all. I love talking to y'all, and it keeps me busy, keeps me on my toes. And it also builds engagement for the videos and the podcasts that I do. It helps out the guests that come on the show, helps me out, helps everyone out, and it's a lot of fun. Because we premiere the episodes, we also have a live chat for each episode. And, y'all are awesome for coming in the live chat and, blowing it up. It's a lot of fun. Also, if you're not in the video side of things and you're more of an audio person, well, that's where we're at as well. You can check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, and Spotify. And I can only encourage those who enjoy the show to drop a 5-star review if you wouldn't mind, oh so kindly. It definitely helps the show grow and get out there to others. And also, if you like the show, hit that follow button, hit that notification bell. You'll be notified. We drop episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. And I've been doing 4 shows a week now, so I've been popping in a bonus one in there for y'all. So I hope you enjoy that. But again, to the community, much love to y'all. Blessings to you. I'll be praying for y'all. I definitely pray for y'all as a unit, as a team, and I think that that's something that we are together. We're just a team. We're here to share the gospel of Jesus Christ in any way that we can. We're here to expose darkness in any way that we can, and we're here to just you know bring that confirmation and to bring that awareness of the truth. So, with all that said, folks, thank you so much. I will see you next time. Bye bye.